Ladies, gentlemen, very welcome this morning at Florence School and Bruegel in Brussels. We are teaming because Europe is facing a defining moment, an incredible challenge, and we have to face it all together. Academics, industry, public sector, anyone, ordinary citizens, we have to do it together. For a reason that I do not know, but I can only see, the Russian leaders are willing to write new geopolitics, are willing to change the world, and are doing what they can to make this change irreversible. It's a fact. That's it. That's like it. But as you know, it has many aspects. One is human. Unfortunately, it is for Red Cross and not for us. One is military, again, not for us. One is economical and industrial, and this one is for us. Because in Europe, since more than a decade, we may even say since 2 decades, we are doing everything we can to have a peaceful, well-working, efficient gas market and gas industry. And this is really challenged by what we are crossing. 2 weeks ago, we discussed it at a very general level with even a former Prime Minister of Finland, a former energy commissioner, to see what are the alternatives, what are the options, what might we prefer. This week, it's obvious that we have to disconnect from Russian energy. Exactly when? Discussion being open, but our discussion is open also, particularly for gas, and that's the discussion of today. So practicalities, we will disconnect from Russian gas. We are obliged to do. We cannot trust Russia as a supplier, and we cannot finance Russian state and Russian army. But how to do it? So we have a fantastic panel with old friends being Walter Boltz and Klaus-Dieter Borchardt. Klaus-Dieter has been director for internal market for years, and is now a lawyer in Brussels. Walter, as being the head of the Australian energy regulator and a kind of a leader of the European gas target model, and today he's leading his own consultancy, if I remember correct. And Carole is a dear friend from France. I knew Carole when she was a very dynamic student, but now she is a manager, and her responsibility is to manage gas storage at Storengy. We had also foreseen somebody else, but Ilaria will explain more. The first debate is about the framework. Do we have the framework? Is it possible to disconnect from Russian energy with what we have existing today on the legal policy regulatory side? And this discussion will be led by Georg. And again, I do deeply thank Bruegel for the very active role played into the European discussion about it, how to disconnect, when to disconnect from Russian energy. And the second one is very different. The second one is the industry. What the industry can do. The industry is not a public decision maker. An industry has investment, investors, workers, clients, assets, etc. And for us, academic, we only have to talk to do something. But industry is in a sense hard reality. And this will be led by Ilaria Conti, the head of gas, methane, and green gases at Florence School. And I will come back at the end for the general discussion. So I first give the floor to Georg. Georg, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thanks a lot, Jean-Michel. That was already a lot of the introduction, so that we can quite directly jump into our more specific discussions. And as Jean-Michel said, I think we have the best possible panel to discuss the institutional setup to get over the looming gas crisis. And what I would like to do is not to have kind of big presentations, but rather to have a more conversational way of discussing a couple of institutional issues which I think are crucial to be discussed for essentially this year, preparing next winter, making sure that we don't rely on Russian gas anymore in whatever the situation might be, whether it's a supply stop from the Russian side, whether it's a import stop from our side. So I think in the last session, we very clearly lined out that this is a question that needs to be answered for very high level geopolitical reasons. We need to find a good answer to that. And the challenges are, as usual, in the details. Now, we have at Bruegel had a couple of papers in which we discussed and described how, on aggregate, the volumes in terms of supply and demand would be adequate to get over the next winter, even without Russian gas. And I find this given other studies that we have seen, now more and more convincing that it would be possible. We see that more and more LNG is coming into Europe, and that demand reduction is already happening. So it looks as if we will be able to make it. But the challenge now will be less on the technical and kind of on the volume side, but more on the question of how do we organize to be sure that the internal market holds, that solidarity holds, that markets on the one side and public policy on the other side, that different member states are working in a way, in a framework together that ensures that we make optimal use of what we have available in order to minimize the disruption and maximize the availability of gas to consumers. Now, I would like to kick off essentially with one question, which is, okay, we see more gas coming in. We see that things are going in the right direction. And the first question is the existing framework actually already adequate? So will we be able to survive next winter with just letting our existing framework continue to work? While we, on the one hand, see national solutions like procurement and allocation of gas, Germany going to Qatar being one example, while we see that some countries start to stop markets from functioning, like the Spanish market. And so can all this work together that solidarity holds as it is, or do we need a significant change? And I would potentially ask Walter to maybe kick off with some thoughts on whether he thinks the current framework is adequate for getting through next winter, and then Klaus-Dieter can comment on that. Walter?
Thank you very much, Georg, and welcome everybody. I mean, I can only agree with Georg. I think we can survive without Russian gas. I think in a way we also have to, most likely. And I also believe that the alternative also, sketched out by the German government, like reducing the gas volumes, and also the European Commission, is actually not the right approach, because what we see now is if we have gradual reduction of Russian gas, basically the price will go up. And the revenue will stay the same. So if Russia sells only a third of the gas, but at 3 times the price, we have no effect. So that's the first point. I think we need to be smart, and we need to think about the ultimate goal, and that's actually denying the money and not so much refusing to take the gas. Second point is, I think we have an institutional issue, because at the moment we are still having in most of Europe the gas market, and not everywhere and not in the same amount, but basically we have the gas market as the model. And I do not believe that the gas market will easily solve all the problems we have, because we see that every country is trying to get somehow gas on its own, and I'm pretty sure once the gas arrives and neighboring countries are short of gas, they will intervene in the market. So I think what we probably do need, we need a framework of EU-wide cooperation, better than what the Commission has now unveiled with their, kind of coordinating meetings and so on. So I think there are probably two alternatives. One is to let the market play out, allow individual countries to intervene in the market, have a certain level of chaos, and have some regions that are really worse off than others. But of course, if the market is there, we will see some gas flow across the borders. We'll see all sorts of problems. It will be expensive to compensate customers for the amount of gas they are not getting or the high prices they have to pay. Or if we are smart, we are able to coordinate all that. And if we coordinate, I think we can relatively easily survive. I mean, just going down 3 degrees for household saves 14%. We can double the utilization of coal-fired generation, plus a little bit, maybe 10% savings in industry or 15%, almost results in the 90 to 100 BCM that we import from Russia at the moment. So the gas shortage will not really create big problems, but we do see at the moment that the uncertainty creates problems. This fear, uncertainty, doubt creates a price that's significantly higher than last year, although the supply-demand situation is much better than last year. So I think we are at the moment where we either accept that this plays out and we use the current institutions, or we are really able to establish a more central control or a better control. Doesn't even have to be central, can be regional, but a better control. And our problem is that we don't have any instruments of doing that on the EU level. There is no single entity or single legal basis for making those decisions. So we will see if we are, let's say, rising to the challenge and are able to coordinate properly and use what we have as a market, but also have a lot more kind of coordination, but also enforcement, because coordination is nice, but we will need to enforce it. And that remains to be seen. So if we do that, I think we can relatively easily survive a year without Russian gas. Now, okay, what happens afterwards, the future will tell. I do not believe that this will be forever cutting the gas relations between Russia and Europe, but who knows? I mean, we will be able to survive, but I think we need to work on the institutions.
Thanks a lot. Klaus-Dieter, what's your thought on that? So should we go to the Commission or?
No, I'm not talking for the Commission, to be very clear. But I fear that I do not share the optimism of the Bruegel study and also Walter's optimism that we can, as Walter even said, easily survive without Russian gas. For me, we can survive without Russian gas in the midterm. And I would say, if we would really, as you have put it in the title, talking here today, a phase out, where we have the certainty that we can gradually step out of the Russian gas, let's say within the next decade, I'm with you. That is doable. We have instruments, we have the Fit for 55. If we fully implement it with the diversification that is coming, etc., we could replace without any problem the Russian gas imports of today. But if we are talking, as Georg has also said, that he is interested in the short term and even in an imminent stop of imports or stop of exports from the Russian side, or an imminent ban of Russian gas from the European side, then I must say that I do not see where your optimism comes from. I think in that situation, we are dealing with a deep crisis. And there is absolutely no way that also, Walter, what you have said, what is all correct in terms of that we need EU-wide coordinated body or coordination body and coordination instruments, etc. You will not get this in time if, for instance, this ban or stop will happen within the next 3 or 4 weeks. And here I see the big danger, because there I'm sharing what you are saying, that the only solution for the member states is that they go their own way. And you have seen already certain have started, taking Germany as an example, Italy now, just this morning they have done a deal with Algeria, plus 9 BCM for the next year. So this is clearly the situation. And therefore, as you have nicely said, Walter, there are two options. But if we have a disruption, the good option to develop now a European-wide coordination center is not going to happen. Not going to happen in time. So all for me remains with how much time do we have? The more time we have, the better I see the perspectives, because I agree with you that we need a coordinated European way here. Because if you do not coordinate, you have the national champions, you have rich against poor, you have those who have already established relationships with Northern Africa and others have not, etc. So this is something where now we should work fast and to see how can we establish such a coordination center. Walter, you have said the Commission has now started with what they call a platform for this. That this platform should also be responsible for the purchase, the common or jointly purchase of gas. What is not clear for me so far is that a platform for purchase gas, natural gas, and LNG at large, or is it only for in the connection with filling the storages? Which makes a big difference, because I personally would see also a big problem if we would now create a body that would be responsible for purchasing all gas, natural gas and LNG, and then distributing it to the different member states. That would be the end of any markets. For the storage filling, yes, I think that makes sense. And also in the situation price-wise where we are, it makes sense. Then a last point as my introductory remark, I agree with you, Walter, that we have to think about the future relationship with Russia, because as I said, the best would be that we have an organized phase out of Russian gas. But that cannot be done on the basis of the current contractual situation that Gazprom has. Here, I think we also need to, when the moment is there, to discuss transparency of pricing, excluding the so-called political coefficient that Gazprom has applied in its current contract. It means we need benchmarks for the pricing. We need the exclusion of the political use of the pipelines. And we also need to exclude that, as Gazprom has practiced today, that it's not delivering to certain areas. So what I mean is, yes, we could try, but also under our conditions, not just saying we do what we always did with Russia, because as Georg has rightly said, the consequences that the EU has taken from the 2009 or 2014 crisis were just there to create an SOS regulation where we can intervene in the crisis. But we have not looked at a longer term establishment of either a relationship with Russia that is, let's say, more compatible with our market rules, or if they were not willing to do it, to prepare an orderly phase out of the Russian gas. But as I said, and I underscore it here again, if it is a disruption from whatever side, I fear that we will end up in your first option that we both do not like to see, and that is a race one member state against the other. And that would be creating huge problems, not only with regard to the supplies, to the industries of different member states, but also, as Georg has also mentioned, it would break up the solidarity between member states. And therefore, the call is to develop now, as fast as possible, a European coordination center that right from the beginning takes now the coordination up. And then we can discuss how deep this coordination has to go, because it is also true that you cannot make the Commission now, for instance, as the sole purchaser of gas and LNG, as I've said. That would, in my view, go much too far. But the coordination with the facilitation of the Commission is, in my view, the right way to go. And we can further discuss how the details of such a cooperation and such a center could look like.
That was a lot of very deep points, and I think we would probably need hours to dive into it. And I think it would be very useful to also follow up with something written on this. But maybe Walter, you want to quickly react.
Just maybe a few short comments. There are many things I agree with Klaus-Dieter, but I think we have to be aware that this gradual phase out of Russian gas without a lot of, let's say, measures that support that will not yield the results we're looking for. And the results we're looking for is basically limiting the amount of money we have to remit to Russia. And the gradual phase out at the moment increases prices for gas, and therefore Russia gets more money for less gas, which is ultimately not what we're looking for. So if we want to, and I agree with Klaus-Dieter, I don't think it's very likely we will see a very effective coordination. I mean, very few instances in the history of the EU have resulted in very efficient coordination, maybe the euro crisis and a few others, but even those were done outside of the EU framework. It was a member state thing. So if we don't have this coordination, at least we needed coordinated actions to limit the amount of gas being brought into Europe, because we don't have an instrument how to do that. Of course, a state-owned company can be instructed by their government buy only half as much Russian gas, but we don't have only state-owned companies, and so we need to think about this. And the second point is we should be aware that Russian gas is technically the cheapest, so Russia has the cheapest short-term marginal cost for gas compared to all the other sources of gas, which means unless we put some financial burden on it, it will always undercut other gas sources. So if we want to reduce gas consumption, we have to think how to avoid the problem that prices go up and compensate for it, and Russia gets more money for less gas. And secondly, even in the medium term, within, let's say, 9 months or 12 months, we need to see how we balance the competitiveness, and that means either an import duty or some way of auctioning the amount of gas that's allowed to enter from Russia into the EU, and the money going to some EU institutions who basically offer the import capacity, something like that. So I think we have to think of the overall picture, and is limiting amount of money going to Russia, and not so much limiting the amount of gas we are ready to take from Russia, because really the ultimate goal is the first one. And I think it's more likely than not that there will be some sort of chaos if there is a disruption at a relatively high price, although it doesn't have to be that way in my view.
But Walter, if I may ask, I haven't understood yet what you want to do with Russia, because on the one side you say we cannot lower the volumes, but we need to lower the income. So if you do that, then you have to bring the prices down for the Russian gas. And then I agree with you, you could have import duties and these kind of things. But then if you do that, you need, because that would definitely also lead to, let's say, a decrease of export. I don't think that under these circumstances, the Russian side will continue to deliver supply all the gas. That means you have to prepare in that case also on a reaction from the Russian side, and that means you have to find replacements. And that is, in my view, something that we also should focus on. And we have seen that was a good story after 2014, that with the improvement of the European infrastructure for LNG flows, so that we have attracted more LNG to Europe. And also currently what we have imported from the United States, for instance, is something that has had an impact also on the balancing out the European gas market. And this has definitely to be strengthened further. And there are very good opportunities. They will take also time, and that is always my problem here. If we have an immediate disruption, then it will be really difficult to overcome that. But if you do it now and you have to start negotiating it, I see, for instance, in the Mediterranean basin, with Israel, with Egypt, with Cyprus, you have a lot of natural gas. You have, for instance, in Egypt, also liquefaction capacity available. So you could immediately start doing that and booking, and also in a cooperation, in a partnership with the region there to attract, and with long-term contracts, attract the LNG from that region. And that would be a win-win. We would get more volumes from that region, and we would help that region also in the economic development. The same goes with other areas, but we have to not only look at the Russian side, we also have to look where do we get replacements. I was very, very surprised, positively surprised about the changes in the attitude in the Netherlands, that even now a majority of the region of Groningen, they have now said, under these circumstances, we are ready to allow a higher production of natural gas from that region. That is certainly something. We have very positive achievements now in new infrastructure. In September, end of September, the Baltic pipe will be opened. That's the pipe from Norway, Denmark to Poland, with a technical capacity of 12 BCM. Normally 10 BCM can flow, but it needs to also to be gradually brought to the technical. So, and we have the gas interconnector between Poland and Lithuania. So I just want to say, we also need to focus on these issues, not just looking to the Russian side. We also now have to see what do we develop in replacing the Russian gas.
I think I would like to not focus too much on the question on whether we should do an embargo, because that is that goes beyond our discussion today. I like Walter's point of saying, okay, we need some sort of visibility on how we deal with Russia in the future, also to make sure that our kind of market-based system knows the direction of travel on how much of the replacements that you described, Klaus-Dieter, are going to be needed, and where they are going to be needed. So if we know, just describing a pathway, how much gas we want is not sufficient, because it's not credible, because they are so cheap. So we need some sort of instrument on our side that ensures that not much more than those volumes are going to come from Russia. But I think the main point of our discussion today is indeed discussing institutions and coordination challenges, and you highlighted already a lot of them, Klaus-Dieter, and kind of with the Dutch gas production. And I mean, there's a couple of very difficult choices to be made in member states that are a bit outside of the market. So the market is functioning within a framework that is there. Societies in the Netherlands decided they didn't want to produce more gas. Society in Germany decided they don't want to, they want to get out of nuclear, and they want to close coal plants. Society in France decided they don't want to have a gas pipeline over the Pyrenees. And I somewhat agree with you, Klaus-Dieter. It's not going to be a cakewalk to live without Russian gas. So there are a couple of very old and hardly won societal compromises that need to be reopened in this. And I wonder to which degree we could expect that heads of state and government, or whatever level, can sit together to discuss what can be a compromise on bringing all the options of flexibility that are potentially available in different member states, whether they can trade it against each other or whether it's completely off the table and we should not bet on those options. So maybe Klaus-Dieter, I would give you first the floor for 3-5 minutes and then ask about it.
I don't know whether I need even that much time, because here I'm rather pessimistic, very pessimistic. Leaving aside, as I said, in the Netherlands, I really believe that they will stay at a higher level of production for a couple of years longer. And that is a good thing. It increases the domestic production. But if you look to the rest, I mean, I cannot imagine that Germany will change its mind and saying now we will take or keep the 3 nuclear power plants that are still running for longer. I think that thing is buried in Germany. They are now accelerating the construction of 3 LNG terminals. And here you can also see it's already a national approach that is done. And your third example, the French Spanish pipeline. I mean, we had an intergovernmental agreement to build at least the smaller version, STEP, it was called, signed by the then French president and the Spanish prime minister, and nothing happened afterwards. And everything fell apart. So here, that at that level that you see from the heads of states and government, intergovernmental arrangement, that I don't see. What I see is that the member states will point to the Commission and to say, come, make a proposal and take a leading role. I mean, a bit like it was, I mean, there the Commission has taken even the first step, if I'm not misled, on the purchase of the vaccine. I mean, we all know that it was not a glorious event that has happened there, but at least what it has achieved is that the richest member states could not purchase a big trunk of the vaccines and doing my population first, and then we see what we do with the others. It was right from the beginning. It was clearly said who is getting what when. And this is exactly also a scheme that we need to introduce when it comes to the distribution of the available gas and including LNG in the nearer future for me. And therefore, this is important. Whether we do it in a European centralized, or we could also use, in my view, the corridors, the security of supply corridors that we have already created with the SOS regulation, and then do it within a corridor, because the corridors have been created according to the needs and the geography and the interconnections that are already there. And that is, in my view, a good basis, so that you have maybe a 2-layer coordination system. You have a EU-wide chaired by the Commission, and then you have below that the corridors, the security of supply corridors, that then will do the implementation of what is decided in the first layer. Something like that I could see working, but not, please, not the Commission as the solely purchase power for natural gas and LNG.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple of things. I mean, I agree with most of what Klaus-Dieter said. I also do not believe we will get an efficient coordination. There is enough gas around Europe. I think within a few years, we should be able to get all the gas we need without Russian imports. But obviously, it will be challenging in the first few years because the infrastructure is not there. Also, the production in other parts of the world is not there. I mean, it might happen faster than we thought. I just remember, like 3 weeks ago, Norway said, okay, we have another 5 BCM. Like 2 weeks ago, they said, oh, maybe 20 BCM. No? And also in the US, you know, there is once, I mean, Europe is paying the highest prices ever for gas being paid. So everybody is trying to get new gas volumes to Europe. So I think we will have enough gas, and given that it's unlikely that we get a really efficient coordination, I think our choice is that we focus on coordinating the few issues that need coordinating, like limiting the import from Russia. I mean, either the Russians turn it off, then we don't have to worry about it. Or if they don't turn it off, then I think we have to limit it effectively and efficiently. We have to address the competitive issue so that they don't undercut prices in the long run. And then I think we either limit demand by forcing or encouraging the shift from gas to coal, for example. I mean, coal plants in 2021 were only 44% used across the EU over the year. If we double that, we have replaced about 65 BCM of gas consumption. But if we are not able to manage that, I think we have to let the prices do the trick. So the price will result in a reduction in gas demand across the board from industry, power generation, and also in households. And if we focus on really the few topics that, okay, we are working as much as we can on the, let's say, sharing of gases, of gas resources that are probably in regions going to be short. In other regions, there won't be a big problem. We let the market sort out the problem of bringing in new gas from different parts of the world, and we will see there will be quickly a lot of gas being brought into Europe from various parts of the world, and the markets behind that will sort it out. The only thing where we have to intervene, I think, is really on the amount of gas being allowed to be purchased from Russia. And for that, we need a full coordination. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And then we have to address the competitive issue, basically through some import duties or taxes or whatever. And then let just the system play out. And of course, coordination cannot hurt. I think there are numerous challenges. For example, if we want sizable amounts of gas from other countries in the form of LNG, we'll need long-term contracts, not just spot volumes for the next 2 years, but like 10-year contract. Nobody will build an LNG liquefaction plant if you offer them to buy a little bit of gas this year. So I think we are probably going to have a very high price time. We hopefully manage to coordinate this limitation of imports, or it's cut off completely. You know, in both cases, we'll have basically the market behind that. Some countries might decide to intervene in the market, which is understandable, but I don't think it will be the general model in all across the EU. And then the market will solve the allocation of gas that's brought into Europe to various parts of Europe where it's needed most. And then I think on the EU level, we can maybe work on compensating any unintended consequences of high prices, because some countries will have more trouble, financing those high prices. And we just have to make sure that we don't pay the high prices to Russia, because that would defeat the whole purpose.
Maybe on this question of allocation of gas through markets or through coordination, my worry at the moment is that my country is currently having a plan to subsidize industrial consumers, and I'm sure that the German government will be able to pay a lot of money, and more money than many of the East European countries, to subsidize their industrial consumption. So that will kind of, Germany might claim that they keep the market, but it's a market to their benefit, because they are then sucking out the gas of the other markets here. And that might not increase the willingness of other countries to play market rules still. Other countries might decide to cap prices, or to kind of forcibly do regulatory measures. Then we have the old security of supply architecture, with the idea that protected consumers don't have to reduce their consumption while industry has. So I think there's a lot of questions to be asked on what is the right way to allocate gas, both between member states and between different types of consumers. And it would be very interesting to hear a bit your views. Maybe Walter, you can start, whether you think that we can essentially try to have a very forceful implementation of state aid rules and whatever, and try to shield the existing market that we have to do the job in a very turbulent environment, or whether we need some hybrid model or a fully regulated model to ensure. And I guess I'm speaking here about the crisis situation, kind of a full stop where demand and supply are really in territories we typically don't see.
I mean, this is obviously let's say a difficult question. The easy answer is obviously we'd be much better off if we would intervene in a coordinated way. Having said that, I'm with Klaus-Dieter. I don't think it will happen. Klaus-Dieter has been more around the EU than I have, but my experience also shows that, if you have a situation like this, normally the solidarity really runs out fairly quickly. So there won't be any coordination. You will have some countries that intervene one way or the other. I think on an EU level, it would be useful to retain some sort of market operation on the wholesale level, because on the wholesale level, this would assure that the gas kind of flows between countries, because we'll have one country that's maybe more successful in getting gas from Norway, another one more successful getting gas from Algeria. Somebody else will have more success with the Americans getting LNG into Europe. And if we try to coordinate that, I think we're kind of lost, because it's very complex. It would require a very central, very fact-based decision-making, which is it's untypical for the EU. So let's try to get the wholesale market at least going, give up on the retail market. Each member state will do whatever they want and can. And maybe on the EU level, we can allocate a little bit money to kind of cushion some of the negative effects on small household customers and so on. I do not think the Commission has the strength to really enforce state aid rules in a very stringent way in the current situation. So while it would not be a bad idea, I think what the EU could also do is we could have an organized way of reducing demand. I mean, there are measures that are market-based. For example, we could make a demand reduction auction on the EU level, offering money to companies who are ready to consume less gas in the next winter. And let's say half of the money would be paid from EU funds and the other half from national funds. And we would have the option of reducing demand, and that could go to power stations as well as to industrial gas users, because the more we reduce demand, I think the more the price pressure will become easier. Because once people know, oh, there is a possibility to reduce demand by, I don't know, 30 BCM, suddenly there is no anticipated shortage, because we will be able to buy probably 50 BCM on the LNG market. We'll get a little bit more from pipelines. If you reduce demand by 30 BCM, we are no longer short. And suddenly, I think the prices will drop and we will have a much more comfortable situation. So I think we will need a hybrid approach. I don't think the full coordination will work, because that's not how the EU functions. So let's leave the retail part to the member states. There's not much choice, I think, the EU has. And if the EU manages to limit Russian imports and to assist in demand reduction and assure that the wholesale market still works, I think that would already be a big success.
I agree with Walter's hybrid approach. I also do not believe that the market alone or public intervention alone is the right thing to do. So we need to take the best of both sides. And I think Walter has well described. I personally am not so pessimistic, Walter, as it might have sounded, that at the EU level, we, together with the member states, we cannot create this coordination. Where I was 100% skeptical was to leave it to the member states to organize themselves in intergovernmental agreements between member states. There, I have absolutely no hope. But with, as I said, maybe a very straightforward, based on security of supply approach coordination, here I see very good chances, and I give you an example. I think in the next session it will maybe be developed a bit further. What the Commission has proposed on the filling of gas storages. I mean, here it's a good example to say those member states who have I would say, have not enough. The Commission has said no. I would say not enough storage facilities. They can or have to purchase the gas storage up to 15% of their annual consumption in a neighboring country, and the neighboring country is obliged to offer such a volume. These kind of things, for me, it's a good example. I mean, this is a typical SOS instrument that is done in a coordinated way at EU level together with the member states. So this, in my view, can work, and we can now look for other examples where these kind of things. I could imagine the distribution of LNG and these kind of things can work. Where I'm 100% with you, Walter, is on those, that the wholesale market, retail market, I think I also believe, leave it to the member state in crisis situation. The wholesale market, as far as possible, we should keep it, because we need the flows within the European Union. And I also agree fully the really crucial role that the demand management has to play. And here I could also imagine that more coordinated measures could be taken within a member state, but also cross-border. So these kind of things will definitely help us to at least reduce all the risks that are inherent of a disruption.
Would have two more points for the end of our session, and the maybe with a request for a very short answer to the first one, so that we have a bit more time for the second one. The first one is again on joint procurement, and as I see it, we have discussed very different options here and kind of dismissed a lot of them. So there was the idea, okay, we don't do joint procurement at all. We can try to pool maybe the Gazprom contracts at least into some some form, so that we are not subject to divide and rule from that side. We might try to fill at least the storages based on joint procurement. We might put all the new volumes that Europe wants to attract under joint procurement, or we kind of try to do the full thing, which is seemingly not a good and realistic idea. So where would you kind of on this continuum put yourself at? And maybe with a question for a short answer, Dieter.
As I said, for me, I would start definitely only with the joint procurement for the volumes needed for the storage fillings. I would not go further. Also, with all the on the basis of the arguments that Walter also has already put forward, that let's keep the wholesale market working. And also, I mean, you all know that this, even if it is done by a public body, the purchase, it is not market conform. So I would not go immediately really to the full interventionistic approach. Keep it for the storage, and there it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think the governments or the Commission or anybody is great in purchasing gas. I think the European Commission could offer smaller member states some sort of framework contract if they wanted, because sometimes, you know, the volumes they will buy or they are able to buy will be kind of too low to make them interesting clients to some of the big LNG exporting countries. But otherwise, I would limit this role. I think this joint procurement doesn't really work too well, and it creates time delays, difficulties, and I don't think it will do the trick. And don't forget, we have a lot of gas around Europe, so there are many options there. I think it's just maybe the problem of, you know, covering the next year or year and a half, and then I'm sure we'll see million cubic meters of gas coming from all sorts of areas to Europe. because we have a lot of gas. It just is not so easy to replace Russian gas immediately. But in the medium term, there's a lot of gas around Europe.
And then on my kind of closing question to you, we spoke a lot on coordination and I'm wondering a bit. I mean, we have some soft coordination in Brussels happening, but what kind of, if you could have a wish list in terms of how much money, how much people, how much political weight should be given there, would be interesting to hear a bit your thoughts on kind of how strong should a European coordinatory element look like, and maybe also over time, but that's more like a crisis thing that we do now for 12, 24 months, or whether we would like really to change the entire architecture of the coordination of the gas industry at the European level. Can I start with you, Walter?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think a little bit more coordination on the level of DG ENER or the Commission would be useful, but a little bit is more like having, let's say, 15 to 20 people to deal with this. I mean, we have several coordinating bodies on the EU level. We have ENTSO-E and GE, and we have GIE and so on. So there is not really a shortage of coordinating bodies of the industry. I mean, maybe sometimes somebody needs a push, and for member states, it's maybe easier to deal with some coordinating entity on the Commission level than on the industry level. So I would feel a little bit more coordination is necessary. I also wonder if not a revision of the security of supply regulation is warranted, because we knew in the summer of 21 that we had a problem. We knew storages were pretty empty. We knew nobody was injecting gas into storages. We knew that Russia has been already once lying to Europe, saying, oh, we will deliver more gas once our storages are full, but no, they didn't. We knew that China was buying all the LNG cargoes globally that they could get their hands on. So I think there was actually a time, maybe in early September, where people started to really worry, but nothing happened because nobody felt responsible for doing that. Yes, the Commission called a few gas coordination groups, but I mean, these are just kind of coffee chats, you know, no action. So I wonder if one of the, let's say, lessons learned shouldn't be, okay, we need somebody, some institution that assesses that situation, but that's also to some degree able to act on it. Because just talking about it doesn't get us anywhere. You know, it doesn't inject a single cubic meter of gas in the storage. So we need somebody to be a little bit more proactive, and that probably would be something, you know, organized within or around DG ENER or the Commission, some sort of emergency preparedness entity, but not really to buy all the gas or something, but, you know, maybe even have a budget, said, okay, we consider it very serious, so we are able to, whatever, sponsor any purchase and storage injection with 20% or something like that. But that's maybe one lesson learned that we should think about carefully, so we don't run into the same or a similar problem again in a few years, because all the information was there, nobody acted. So there is clearly a lack of coordination and action. Because calling a meeting and sending emails is nice, but that doesn't help us burn, you know, or get our homes warm. So I think some stronger coordination is useful, but not a huge entity. You know, this is more like in the 15 to 20 people range that maybe is a little bit more focused on this issue of security of gas supply than, you know, the various departments in DG ENER, but not a huge entity with a huge budget. I don't think that's necessary.
I agree with that conclusion, but let me remind us all, because today we are concentrating on the gas purchase here in the discussion, and how do we get enough gas for our industry, for our households, etc. But let us not forget, we have also still to combat the climate change. And there we have taken a clear position that we are phasing out gas, natural gas, and we are replacing it. We have the hydrogen strategy to be implemented and these kind of things. And I think whatever we do, and especially when we now starting creating institutions or bodies, this has to be very, very transitional. And I would not like to see here that we are creating a new body, a monster where we install a natural gas and LNG purchase agency. Because this, in my view, would have terrible lock-in effects, because such a thing you would not only create for the next 5 to 10 years. So therefore, I think we have to distinguish here 2 things. The first is on the market side, and the other is on the security of supply side. The security of supply side, for me, it's very clear. It is a public good. And that has to be organized also as such. And I agree with Walter, the gas coordination group as it functions today is not the right body. Here, I would like to see, for the security of supply, a 24/7 body that also gathers all the information, daily flows, observations, monitoring of the situations, so that you can anticipate that they are also involved in the monitoring of the gas storage fillings and these kinds of things. So that must be, it can be a subgroup of the gas coordination group, but something with members. When we created back, I think it was after 2014, the gas coordination group, a security of supply group, it was working from 9 to 5. So please, no crisis after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, because then there's no one answering the phone anymore. I mean, we are living in times now for the next foreseeable future where we really need very strong rules on how do we steer a crisis. And this steering has to be done in a coordinated form, 24/7, and with clear tasks, and also partially decisional powers. And then you have the market, what we have discussed largely. And here, I think we have said, let the market do what it can on the wholesale side. And I don't want to repeat the rest. But for me, it is, again, very important, because now Walter has mentioned, yeah, we have still coal-fired power plants, yes, and take Germany, where they said, yeah, we keep them longer in the reserve, they will run more. But all this goes to the detriment of the achievement of our climate targets. So let us not forget this, that having a good grip on the management of the current crisis is one thing, but it has to be embedded, still embedded in the longer term vision that we have with regard to our Paris commitments and our own 2030 and 2050 targets. The 2030 targets, in the light of the crisis, in my view, must be revisited. It does not make sense, as I have seen in some Commission paper, also in the REPowerEU, where they said, our member states may even increase the energy efficiency targets for 2030. It's wishful thinking. I have already doubts that the targets that are fixed now will be achieved. So it's easy to set new targets and then saying with the targets, if we reach them, everything is fine. Yes, but we will not reach them, and then we have the problem. So we need to bring these things together. And when we are discussing all these things that we have discussed in the first panel, we still need to reflect the impact that might have on the achievement of our Green Deal goals.
Many thanks. It only leaves to me to now close the session. I because already ate a bit into the following session, but I thought it was both a somewhat sobering discussion that we had, because many of the best solutions that we could think of seem not to be possible on the table. But it was also a very constructive debate on kind of the elements that can contribute to manage this crisis. So my feeling is that there's a lot of good ideas available, and that it would be very useful. And I don't know how we can organize that in a sensible way to essentially bring this work together in a structured way and allow, because I think the things are currently moving extremely fast, both on the member states level in Brussels. A lot of good ideas and also bad ideas are taken up extremely quickly. So if we can make a contribution to this thinking process, I would be very much interested in joining forces with you. And with that, I thank you, Klaus-Dieter and Walter, for participating and sharing your great expertise on that, and hand over back to Jean-Michel.
Yeah, we can publish very crude highlights, a few takeaways, even bullet points. This we can do, and we can see if it is useful. But I'm giving the floor to Ilaria.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Jean-Michel, and thank you, Georg, for moderating very well. I think an extremely interesting debate. It was full of very interesting insights. So I think Klaus-Dieter and Walter were really frank and as open as usual in putting forward their reflections. So, but I will not make a very big introduction, because we will have time for a wider discussion also with the previous panelists later on. I'm just introducing the topic of the second session, which is, can the European energy system deal with the phase out of Russian energy? So in the first panel, as Jean-Michel will explain in the introduction, we focused really on the legal and regulatory framework that could support in Europe this immediate reaction, these immediate needs that we are coping with, reducing demand and trying. I think we are really, the big problem is dealing with security of supply, which is now an issue for the next months, for the future, while trying to keep a delicate balance and trying to not to get to over high prices for gas. That's the biggest challenge. And I think if we can maybe summarize a bit where we are now after the first panel, we understood that the European legal and regulatory framework does have some instruments, but we have to distinguish now between those that can actually be immediately activated. So we have a short-term focus and we have a more medium long-term focus. And we learned that there are several options. And of course, energy diplomacy will be important at some point to reestablish a balance with the suppliers, which we had in the past. But I think we are really under a big time pressure now for the short term. So the question that we'll be addressing in the second panel is, can actually the market, can the system, can the industry help to provide some possible short-term solutions in this under this strong time pressure? We had imagined this session with two speakers. We had invited also Dr. Egbert Lege from the Boston Consulting Group. He's actually he has had a long career in energy trading, gas trading. Particularly, he was for many years at E.ON, the German gas company E.ON, formerly E.ON Ruhrgas, and lately an independent consultant. But as we were informed by Egbert that he had to actually take up a very interesting challenge, very important challenge. He has been appointed to be the general trustee and CEO of Gazprom Germania from the German government. So he was actually appointed only 3 days ago, and therefore, as you can imagine, he's under a big time pressure, and his mind is really full with very important and urgent issues to be tackled. So I apologize for not being able to be with us today. But we have Carol and a half, our second speaker in this panel. Carol is working for Storengy, where she is head of your affairs. Yes, head of European affairs at Storengy, the French gas storage company. So with her, we will try to understand the contribution of storage to the whole picture. And I know, Carol, you have prepared some slides so that we at least can understand where we start from, what the value of storage is and can be in this emergency situation we are living in. Carol, over to you.
Thank you, Ilaya. So yeah, definitely we need some commitment value. We need to see how we can contribute in a way we respond to the energy crisis. And for sure, at the same time, we need to see to what extent we can intervene in a coordinated manner, in a coordinated way, and storage is part of the answer, as we need to prepare ourselves ahead of the next winter. This is already for the short term, but we need also some regulation for the following years. We need to have this commitment value for this year, but also for the following ones. Just before discussing the regulation, the proposal from the Commission, I would like to start with the first slide on setting the scene. So if you can move on to the next slide, please. Yeah. So as you can see on the map, don't worry, I won't explain everything, but you can see that there are a lot of colors here because we have different regulatory regimes in Europe for storage. Why? Because storage operators have been under pressure for several years. And because of a decline in price spread, storage operator reporting losses, and for some of them, so consequently, member states have introduced progressively different measures to maintain capacity as a security of supply measures. And now we can see that we have different kind of regulatory regimes in Europe, with the countries, for example, in pink, where actually you don't have so much regulation. It's more negotiated TPA. Then you have countries in blue, what we could call blue here, where you have a regulated TPA. Regarding this country, it's not as simple as you can see here, because of course you can have also some storage obligation, some strategic storage in addition to the regulated TPA. It could be also a mix of strategic or storage obligation with negotiated TPA. And for example, in countries like in France or in Italy, for example, where you have what we call revenue reconciliation, actually you have a way you can facilitate the cost recovery, but at the same time you have a market-based approach. So many ways you can understand this map. And for sure, many ways we understand that for some we have to start from scratch, whereas for others they have already implemented some storage obligation. So one thing to ensure that we understand the same picture is that in terms of obligation, as we are going to discuss this topic today, based on this observation, the starting point is quite different for the different countries. And if we have to achieve the minimum filling requirements, of course, it's not going to be the same game for the different countries. Another point which is very important, but for 2022, is that considering that the storage year has already started in terms of booking capacity, because we have started already a few months ago, it's also key that the ongoing legal proposal doesn't constitute a regulatory change that would give some storage users the opportunity to revise their contract clause. So it's also important that when we discuss the topic, we make the difference between this year that has already started and the following years where we can have even higher targets, for example, regarding the filling target at the end of November. So just to start with this picture, then if we go to the next slide, what is important to understand is that we need a balance between the market value, but also the insurance and the system value. So I don't know to what extent participants are familiar with this iceberg, because we have shown it many times already. But what is important to understand is that first, as a Commission, by ensuring that gas storage are filled, the Commission proposal aims now to preserve the continued availability of the system and above all the insurance value of storage capacity. So we are very, we we are very supportive of these filling requirements because we need this value to be recognized, the insurance value, which means that we need to insure ourselves against extreme price spike. And also the system value. So we have been able to organize ourselves in a way we have an optimized energy system. So we don't overinvest in the network, being the gas pipe, transmission pipeline, or even the electric lines. So we are in favor of this optimization, being sure that we provide the security of supply, the insurance value, and we need this value to be recognized, but also captured. So we are very keen on these measures that enable us to ensure that this focus enable to capture the invisible part of the iceberg. But in addition of these values that need to be preserved, of course, that may we may have some question on this in the way that will impact also the market value. And we need to ensure that we preserve not only the insurance and system value, but also that the visible part remains visible. So we need to ensure that the shippers, for example, can still make some arbitrage value on the very short term, but also on the seasonal, for seasonal fluctuation. So what is important is that we have to find in the regulation a good balance between the visible and the invisible part in a way we capture all the different values for ensuring that the storage operator can provide and generate this value for the system as a whole. So that means that we need for the visible, for the market value, we need to preserve this market value. What does that mean? We need to limit in a way or another. We need to limit in the future the checkpoints during, you know, as part of a trajectory. We need to ensure that we have limited checkpoints in a way it's not seen by the shippers as a hard filling obligation during, you know, for the different months. And we need also to have a higher tolerance in the way we can deviate, or I mean, the shippers can deviate from this obligation by having a curve where we have 5%, for example, of tolerance for the threshold. So this is one important point. Regarding the market value, another thing which is also very important is being sure that the market-based approach is the first approach to ensure that we can ensure that we allocate efficiently the storage capacity, meaning that the shippers can make some arbitrage and the arbitrage value, which also means that we should have only an entity designated by member state to start it, to kick into force once the market doesn't respond anymore. So it means that we should have an entity in addition to the market participants as a supplier of last resort only. Then if we want also to preserve the insurance and system value, we need to recognize this value and to capture this value at the same time. So we need to assess and capture this value. So for sure, we are in favor of a discount on tariff at entry and exit point of a storage facility, because it would help us to be more attractive than before. We are in favor during this crisis of some state aid financial support for the shippers and also for the entity of last resort that will also help to inject gas in the storage if needed. And the last but also very important question is we believe that we need to further debate on what we call the burden sharing mechanism, because it has been discussed already in the first session and previously. In all member states, we don't have the same level of storage capacity. In some countries, like in Austria, they have more capacity than the consumption level required at a national level. So there are a lot of questions behind the burden sharing mechanism and the way we could have an efficient burden sharing mechanism, being sure that at the end, it's not too costly for some member states. So if we move on to the next and last slide, the key principles are well the same. Market-based pricing first, and then along with a set of regulatory measures, as we need to internalize the insurance and system value that cannot be revealed and recognized by the market of in a way we don't see it at the last moment and then it's too late. So we need first to establish market-based pricing as a foundation of efficient gas storage, enabling a level playing field between different sources of flexibility. Then, of course, we need measures to capture externality like the insurance and system value. So filling obligations are more than welcome. Then another question that will be very important in the future is how we can facilitate cost recovery if we don't have market incentive that would help the users to ensure that they have as an objective or as a target to fill the total capacity of storage ahead of the next winter. And then, of course, understanding this topic is understanding that we need a holistic approach, as gas storage is not only a part of a gas system, but of an energy system as a whole. If we find a way we can provide the insurance value, is not going to be only for the gas system, it's going to be for the gas and electricity market. In a way, we will have some long-term benefits of maintaining sufficient gas storage capacity, which means that it's not only for the crisis, it should be considered as a whole, even for the long term. If we preserve the capacity of storage today, in a way we ensure the right performance of gas storage, we ensure also that in the future, we can convert them to hydrogen. So it's about the future also, the future of the hydrogen development, and also, of course, all the different low carbon gases that are included in the topic. So it's of course, the crisis provide us the opportunity to discuss these different signals that are required now, but not only for the current crisis, but also for the following years, as we need to fill the storage as part of the insurance value for the total, for the whole energy system. Thank you.
Many thanks to you, Carol. It was very clear presentation. Thank you for reminding us of the different types of values that storage brings within. I don't think there were many doubts on those who work in the gas sector about the importance of storage. And I think, as usual, everybody realizes this even more, unfortunately, these days. So it's important to remind that indeed storage can be one of the instruments which can help mitigating the dramatic effects of this crisis. And indeed, as you mentioned, the European Commission has been focusing and is still focusing on some proposals, some new measures that are quite innovative to some extent, some innovative proposals and ideas on how to improve the use of storage. So maybe one quick question to you would be actually a request for a comment on something that Klaus-Dieter said today in the first panel. So if I understood correctly, he was mentioning when he mentioned this proposal of a platform for joint purchase at European level for gas. He discouraged the idea that this joint purchasing mechanism could apply to LNG and gas, let's say, business as usual. So he said this would mean if we set up something which is meant to stay longer term, this would eventually mean the end of any market. But he also said for storage, perhaps there's more flexibility. For storage, perhaps it would be okay to think of a joint purchasing mechanism. So I would like to ask your reflections on this.
It's not the easiest question, but thank you for asking. What is important is that as we are now facing a crisis, we can see that, for example, LNG terminal and storage assets are complementary tool and not seen only as in competition, which means that if we have the right level of storage capacity in Europe, in an optimal way, we will be able to import more gas, more LNG than before. So, for example, what it would be interesting is to see to what extent we can provide this solution at EU level, because the gas that will be in Europe will not be in another part of the world, and we are in the global world. So the idea behind the storage is being sure that we have understood so far that it's a commitment value. If we have storage within Europe and not outside, that helps a little to find the right balance that would be needed at a later, not today, but ahead of next winter. We have to think that way. But I won't say more than this, because of course it's about also gas purchasing. So it's more than the question about storage.
Okay, sure. And when you say in your presentation, you talked about market-based pricing and importance, of course, of market-based mechanism. Well, what we are witnessing right now is that indeed, because of the difference in because of the too high prices for gas, we are witnessing a slower, let's say, refilling of gas storages at the moment. So if we let the market work, simply in this case, we won't get to the target of 90% of refilling for gas storages that Europe has proposed. So what do you think, how do you think regulation can help now in this case? And what are the, let's say, the interventions that would allow to cope with this emergency situation? And maybe they could be relating only to these emergency times, and then, you know, be reconsidered at a later stage. What's your position on this?
So the answer is having the right balance between a market-based approach, for sure, but also with state aid, as we know the situation, in a way we talk also about obligations, so shippers cannot so easily revise their contract clause, and in the end, by having already some gas within the storage would help to get another price from the market, because today what we see on the market is a price that is amazing. No way you can understand it except by some people saying something at different places. So we need to find some rationality here, and as soon as we will fill the storage with gas, that will help to get already a better price for the market. In a way, we don't have to discuss so much the financial support. But for sure, at the beginning, we need this market-based approach with some financial support for the shippers, for sure. And the obligation is a way that they know exactly what would be the target and to what extent we are already in a commitment at EU level.
Okay, yes. And let's remind that indeed storage covers for about 1/4 when storages are full, obviously, which is what we are discussing about right now. So the total capacity of storage, of gas storage available in Europe would be able to cover for about 1/4 of the total EU gas demand. So, I mean, this is something important to keep in mind, that the target of having storages full by next autumn is not something easy to achieve, but once achieved, of course, it would be a reason more to be, you know, perhaps more optimistic about the future and the upcoming winter, which seems to be the highest obstacle, the biggest, the most difficult moment seems to me, also from what I understood from the previous panel, seems to be the winter just ahead. Perhaps going further in the medium long term, things will ease out with.
Yeah, and even if it's not going to be easy, especially as we have seen at the beginning that we start from different situation in Europe with members that without any rules, others with storage obligation, but also regulated TPA or regulated revenue, we see that in a such short notice, member states have a lot of work to ensure that they can achieve this goal. But then, of course, for some countries, we need to further discuss the, as we need to achieve first this target, the way we can escape from having this target in mind. Then the question is how we can discuss with the countries who need to discuss also the burden sharing mechanism in a way we get an efficient burden sharing mechanism.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you very much. I see that there are maybe a couple of questions. Okay, no, but I think they were more relating to the previous panel. So perhaps unless there are questions from our panelists here, maybe we can open the debate and include storage into the debate, because we are discussing about all the measures possible. So Jean-Michel, I give the floor back to you for moderation of the open session.
Many thanks. The floor is open. So first, would Walter, Klaus-Dieter, even Georg say something to Carol, to comment, to ask questions?
Yes, thank you.
It seems that storage is at the core of many, many things. Klaus-Dieter.
Yes, thank you very much, Jean-Michel. I just raised my hand because indeed I wanted to make 2 or 3 comments. First of all, Carol, thank you very much. It was really very enlightening presentation, and really you really centralized and focused really on the strong points of storage. And now I think everybody understands why it is so important. But not only for natural gas, as you rightly said, also in the future then for hydrogen. But when I listened also to your question and answer with Ilaria, for me, I'm still a bit puzzled, because for me, we have to distinguish 2 situations. The normal market situation, where we want to have sufficiently filled storage for all the reasons you have said, and we have emergency periods. So let's make it clear. The Commission triggers the crisis under the SOS regulation. And I think that also what you have said to the trajectory and the checkpoints and the tolerance, in my view, has to be seen separately, as is the common purchase. For me, it makes a huge of a difference whether you are discussing the common purchase in a crisis situation or in a normal business situation. Because for me, and that's why I think the Commission is right to say it is voluntary to do this common purchasing when it comes to the business. But when it comes to the emergency, here, at least as a last resort, in order to fill the last bit of the storage, what is not done by the operators, then I think there must be a last resort to fill the storage. And that also has to be with a trajectory. I think I agree with you that in the normal business time, maybe we do not need such long or multiple trajectory with these checkpoints, and maybe also a higher tolerance is allowed. But the moment where you have an emergency, which also has an impact then on the prices that will go up. And if you wait with the last filling up to the last moment and you really are in a crisis situation, then the prices will go again through the roof, as we have just experienced. So I think the trajectory and also the deviation is, of course, linked also that this instrument is not only about security of supply, it is also to keep prices in check. And therefore, I think one has to find a nice compromise there. And for me, it is important that one should somehow distinguish these 2 situations, a normal business situation and, of course, the emergency. And then maybe more drastic measures should then be deployed, but which are not necessary when the market is more or less functioning.
Carole?
Yes, you're fully right. I didn't say it clearly, but regarding the filling trajectory, for example, there is a difference between this year and the following years. In reality, in the proposal, you have hard stop and checkpoint for both, for this year and the following years. So I was more discussing for the following years, because we know that it's not the same for this year. And it was not easy to say it during the presentation, but it's the opposite regarding the filling target. It's easier to have a lower target for this year, lower 80%, because at the beginning it was 90%. Because for this particular year, we have already booked the capacity. We have already had the auction, and if the target was too ambitious, we were not sure that it would be possible to achieve them for 2022. So for this year, of course, we need these checkpoints, let's say that way, and with the hard stop. And we need also these filling targets, but in a way it's lower than the following years. And for the following years, we need higher targets. In a way, we ensure that we preserve the insurance and system value. But for the filling trajectory, I would say that shippers need to feel comfortable with the arbitrage value and perhaps higher tolerance, or let's see, not so much checkpoints, I don't know. So we need to make the difference for sure.
Thank you, Carole. Clositer, remarks, or we go to Walter?
No, I'm fine with Carole's statement, yeah.
Yes, merci. Vielen Dank. Walter?
Yes, I think that we have had for many years the misconception that storage and usage of storage had anything to do with security of supply. And of course, it does not. If the storage are full, it has a positive effect on security of supply, but security of supply is a public good, and it's not the private company's objective to assure security of supply, like we have seen in January, February, where a lot of gas was taken out of storage rather than increase the imports under the long-term contracts, because it was just cheaper to do so. So I think we have to be very clear and say, okay, storage is the way we have it now in those countries that don't have obligatory storage filling or anything. It's a commercial activity. Market participants will do it if they can make money with it, or if they believe they can make money, and they will not do it if they cannot. And security of supply is not their primary concern. So if we want storages to fulfill their role as a security of supply improvement tool, we need special systems, and they can take different forms. They can take a government-owned gas storage like we do in the oil stocks. I mean, we have an oil stock example that has been, I mean, maybe not a great success, but it has worked over the last couple of years, and it is even used for assuring that prices for oil don't go too high, although it was never intended for that purpose. Or we can have obligate a trajectory. We say, okay, if we hand out, let's say, a valuable resource like storage capacity to anybody, we tell this buyer of or renter of storage, okay, we are welcoming you as a storage user, but only if you fill it up with a certain percentage at a certain date. But that is one tool. I think what probably is at the core of this is that the governments need to think about security of supply in their country or in their region, coordinated with the neighboring countries, and determine what is the minimum level of storage they want to have at certain dates. And then they have to put systems in place to assure that. And well, subsidizing shippers might be one tool. It's not that great in my view. Maybe this kind of storage owned by, you know, either the government or some central entity is another possibility. I don't have a preference here, but I think what we need to make sure is that the government feels responsible for security of supply and doesn't have the illusion that market participants will do it. They will do whatever makes them money, but they will not provide security of supply. And once everybody realizes that, and we talk about, okay, how do we assure, I don't know, 80% storage filling by August 25th, then in each country, we can consider what are the tools to do that.
I'm very glad you said that. I'm very glad. Actually, of course, we don't like the situation, but for sure, what we can see with this situation is that we need to understand the insurance value, example, for storage. And you're completely right. We have built storage at a time where we were completely integrated in the infrastructure, in a way we get the optimized energy system, you know, not over investing in the network, for example. And of course, we build it in a way, we did it for extreme situation, because when you have to build capacity is for being sure you can respond to any, to the demand, whatever may be this demand. So of course, the shippers, when they book capacity 1 year in advance, they only book for a normal winter. And it's part of a job to book capacity, to hedge or whatever, to speculate, but only for a normal winter. They are not going to be the ones who will discuss the insurance value, the incremental capacity that needs to be filled in case you have a very cold winter or extreme situation. So this social value, what has been called the public good, need to be preserved in the long term, not only for this situation where of course we need to fill storage up to 80% or even at up to 90%, but in a way we ensure the right performance of storage, ensuring that we are not going to close part of the asset because we don't have an extreme situation on a yearly basis, because it's like for vaccine, it's like for everything which is related to the insurance value. We don't do it for being sure we have it, but for being sure we won't have it, which means that for sure we need to prepare ourselves for this year, but also for the following years, preserving the value, which is insurance system and market value, all of them. So thank you.
I'm arriving, but I'm writing.
Thank you.
Done. Yes, I can tell in public, I know Carol since a while. Before the entry of Hilaria at Florence School, I was responsible for gas many years ago. And with Carol, we try to make clear that storage is fulfilling several roles, and not only market roles. And storage has good properties for the system, for the society, etc. We wrote some papers together. We made several things, but it's not understood everywhere, and it's not understood in every country. But now that we are in the mess, we see it. We see it. And I don't want to intervene more because I stopped doing gas because Hilaria is taking care so well of the gas that I concentrated on electricity. And I also did a gas target model with Walter many years ago. I have several anecdotes, but we have no time. Georg, would you say something or ask questions, making comments, etc.?
I would have one aspect that I'm still struggling a bit to understand on whether we are kind of covered or with the current model, or whether we need something more. The challenge that I'm seeing is that the systemic risk we are currently discussing is a stop of Russian gas flows from east to west in winter or before. And the challenge there is that the pipeline infrastructure that we have in place to bring this gas from west to east was not designed to do that, and that we have a significant amount of gas that is demanded in the east. And the question there is whether in the kind of in looking at storages, we should focus somehow to get essentially first the storages in the east filled and potentially even including those in Ukraine to some degree, in order to be able to have enough gas where we cannot bring it in winter because the pipelines will be congested from September on in the flow direction west to east. So does it make sense to you as a question? And if yes, would you have an idea on how we can better deal with that?
It's for me. Yeah. So first of all, regarding storage, it has been said many times, but I think it's important we can repeat it. It's not evenly distributed in Europe, and we are not in the oil market with this liquid market at the global level. So of course, we need to diversify our asset in a way we get different kind of flexibility tools. But regarding the systemic value, systemic value means that you have a long-term vision. So today we do with what we have already. In a way, we have to fill them. And if we fill them up to 80%, it's already part of a systemic value because you fill them up to a certain level of a total capacity. But saying that, we can't change the landscape now for this year. And we need to do with the storage capacity we have now in Europe. But for the mid to long term and the following years, of course, there are some political questions and also some reason to believe that we need to preserve the insurance and system value, meaning considering that we have to achieve up to 80 or 90% of the filling level of capacity. What is important to understand for storage, because it's important also to have this in mind, if you don't fill the storage up to a certain level, you don't get the right withdrawal rate, and to a certain extent you won't achieve, if you don't fill it the right way, you won't achieve already the right level of consumption that need to be covered by storage. So this is more or less what I can say for today.
Thank you, Carol. It's wonderful. Klaus-Dieter, last word?
Two small comments. First of all, I would still insist on the multifunctionality of storage. And for me, security of supply is part of it. Of course, we can discuss who should cover this. And we have had the same discussion. I can tell you examples of interconnections or pipelines that have been only built because they had a security of supply angle. And therefore, a lot of public funding from the Connecting Europe facility went into these projects. And it was not built in the first place for commercial reasons. And I think it's a bit the same. And I also believe that for the security of supply part of the storage, there should be maybe a public buyer instead of putting an obligation on it. What Georg just said is the second, for me, very, very important. We have a complete different flow scenario in the case that we stop imports from Russia, or Russia stops exports. And this means, in my view, indeed, as Georg said, there are interesting storage facilities in Bulgaria, the Syrian, and we have extended it just also with public aid. We have the Ukrainian storages when the war is over. These things need to be developed, but I agree with Carol, that is not for this next winter. It will be on the longer period. But I agree with Georg that this should be our focus in the first place, because there you have also the highest need. I think in the Central and Western, Northwestern European region, we can more or less manage with what we have because the infrastructure is very dense.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we will have to close. Ilaria and Georg, could you give me your main takeaways?
Should I start? Okay, well, difficult this time because I think there were many interesting insights, but I think what I will take away is definitely that security of supply is, of course, now particularly, well, it's the highest debated topic at the moment. And I would agree that there is, under this particular time pressure, a really important urgency to address security of supply. But security of supply, as Walter, I think, very clearly explained, it's something that is a political objective. It's an objective that if you want to achieve certain targets linked to security of supply via regulation, you can do it via regulation. It's not something you can totally up to the market, because it's an objective that the market won't deliver by itself. And particularly in this emergency situation where we have the need, we have different needs, we have different objectives that were not belonging to the market before, in the pre-war situation, for example, phasing out of Russian gas supply. So it's complex because regulation needs to intervene, but on the other hand, the gas market is a complex one, and certain dynamics activate only if there are market-based mechanisms. And Klaus-Dieter explained very well, there's no point in building a new gas pipeline if no gas will flow there. We've seen that many times in the past. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge, coming up with solutions that are market-based, but do deliver security of supply objectives that are instead political objectives. Thanks.
Thank you, Ilaria. Georg?
Not much to add here. I mean, we are in general terms, and I pick up the point made by Klaus-Dieter Borchert before, to our trilemma, energy trilemma, with the how green do we want to be in the medium to long term, how competitive do we want to be, and how much security of supply do we want to have. So sounds pretty familiar to most of us here in the room. One point that I would like to add maybe to the debate, because it's very close to my heart in this whole discussions that we had, is the point of data. I think we did a relatively good job now in terms of storage data, and I think that has proved very useful in the past months and in the past year. And I'm really happy that this data is being made available on the individual storage sites. We also have good data now on the gas flows between countries and coming into Europe, and it's great that this is available, because for the coordination on the European level, this sort of information is needed. What I think is still very much needed, and we really need it quickly, is demand data on gas demand in the member states. We need to understand how much industrial demand is happening every month. We need to understand how much heating demand is there and power sector demand is there, because if we want to survive the next winter, we will have to do policies on the demand side, and we need to understand very quickly whether they are working or not. And that will be that is for me the big missing data piece. And with that, I would like to close my intervention.
Thank you. It has been a wonderful session. I'm always impressed when professionals speak so frankly and so smartly, and I literally forget that you are professionals. For me, you are friends, and this is something wonderful in the EU, and I'm very happy that Florence School and Bruegel can do it together, because from time to time we are able to put frankly everything on the table and to see how to act with it and to find remedies, solutions to want better the economy or citizens, etc. This is absolutely wonderful, this frankness, this friendship. However, it's also well known from soldiers. My father was soldier in the World War II. Most of the soldiers are extremely friendly with each other, because they face so much pressure that it's human to be friendly with people feeling the same pressure. We will try to do it again and again, because we are a school. Bruegel is more a think tank, but there is no big difference. As long as the think tank is attached to produce real knowledge, not to twist the reasoning and the results, but really to address the issues the best possible. There is no big difference between a think tank and a school. What else? That's it. You know it. You know that the European Commission is doing its best, but you also have to consider what is European Commission. You have heard, like me, 20 people, 30 people. 20 people, 30 people in the size of Florence School. We have 23 permanent people here in the building. So we are facing the fact that we have a light European layer with light teams to produce a decision. And that's it. That's the way we are. I think I have nothing else to say except to tell again that I am horrified by the way the Russian army is behaving in Ukraine. It's very difficult for me even to understand, because I was member of the gas coordination committee of the commissioner, European Russia. And what I've seen from the civil servant, the many important people I worked with during these years, is that they are exactly like nous. They are well educated, they have a very high culture, they listen to the same classical music, etc., etc. But for the reasons that I do not know, it broke. We are now two universes not fighting each other in the sense that European armies are not fighting, but we see that we are only at millimeters to have Russian army fighting European armies, and this millimeter is a buffer provided by the poor Ukrainians. That's it. We did our best to contribute to the debate. We do our best to find solution, remedies. And again, I am grateful to the frankness of all the speakers today. And I am very grateful to Bruegel for all the efforts they have made to have a rational debate about how to stop financing Russian state and Russian army, because the way Russian state is using the money we are sending is not acceptable. This said, I wish you a good day, a good week, etc. Ciao tutti and tutte.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Merci
very
Carole,
much.
merci Klaus-Dieter and Georg.
Merci à
Merci
vous
beaucoup.
tous.